It's wild to think about AI actually reasoning through stuff logically like we do, not just recognizing patterns.
Yeah, it's a big jump.
And this research we're diving into today about these DeepSeek R1 models from DeepSeek AI, well, they claim these models can reason, solve problems like a human would.
Right, exactly. A whole new level of sophistication for large language models.
LLMs, those things behind like chatbots and AI writers.
Exactly. But now with this DeepSeek R1, the whole focus is reasoning, figuring things out step by step.
Okay, so DeepSeek R1, what is it and how they even build it?
Well, it came from these researchers. They were experimenting with different ways to train these AI models, right?
Okay.
So they started with this model, DeepSeek V3, is a previous model.
Right.
And they made two new versions, DeepSeek R1.0 and then just DeepSeek R1. And the really interesting part is they trained each version differently.
Two versions, trained differently. Okay, now I'm intrigued. Tell me about this DeepSeek R1.0.
All right, so DeepSeek R1.0 was their experiment with pure reinforcement learning.
Reinforcement learning, or RL.
Yeah, RL. And so it's not fed any pre-labeled data. It learns through this reward system, almost like, when you're training a pet.
Oh, interesting. So if it gets something right in solving a problem, it gets a reward. But if it doesn't, nothing.
Exactly.
It's just trial and error, constantly adapting based on what feedback it's getting. Pretty clever.
And shockingly effective, actually. They tested this DeepSeek R1.0 on the AIM.
The AIM?
Yeah, the AIM 2024. It's a pretty challenging high school math competition.
Oh, wow.
Initially, it scored 15.6%.
Well, yeah, it makes sense if it had no prior data.
Right. But then, just using reinforcement learning, its performance shot up to 71%.
71%. Wow, okay. That's impressive. I mean, that's got to be more than just crunching numbers. It has to actually be understanding the math concepts themselves, right?
Yeah. And what's really fascinating is that during the training, researchers actually observed DeepSeek R1.0. It seemingly had aha moments. It would be stuck on a problem and then all of a sudden change its entire approach.
Hold on. You're saying it was showing signs of independent thought?
Well, it was behaving in a way that really suggests a deeper level of understanding about the problem-solving process.
Yeah.
Actually, they even quoted the AI in the paper. While it was working on a problem, it generated the text. Wait, that's an aha moment I can flag here.
It's not only solving these really complex problems, but also becoming aware of its own, cognitive processes. That's kind of mind-blowing. And I'll admit, a little creepy.
Yeah, it definitely raises a lot of questions about AI and its potential. Yeah. But we got to remember that DeepSeek R1.0, this was just the first step. DeepSeek R1, it builds on all this, but with a slightly different approach.
Okay, how so? What makes DeepSeek R1 different than the 0 version?
Well, as powerful as DeepSeek R1.0 was, the output was sometimes a little hard to follow. Imagine a brilliant student, but they're super disorganized.
Okay, I get it.
So DeepSeek R1, they wanted to make it more readable, give us some structure.
So taking that raw power, making it more, usable for us humans.
Exactly. And to do this, they use something called cold start data. Basically, it's a small set of human curated data that gives the AI this framework for reasoning in a clear way.
Okay. So it's still learning through reinforcement, but it's starting off with a better foundation, like a guidebook for how to think things through.
Yeah, you got it's a multi-stage process, really.
Yeah.
First, the cold start data sets up a basic structure for reasoning. Then the reinforcement learning comes in, builds on that. And finally, a fine-tuning stage to, refine it for specific tasks.
Makes a lot of sense. It's like combining the best of human guidance with the power of AI learning. But how well did it actually perform? Did DeepSeek R1 really live up to the hype?
Oh, it did. They tested it on all kinds of benchmarks, comparing it to other top AI models. In terms of mathematical reasoning, it did about as well as OpenAI's models on tests like the AM and the Math 500. But what's really interesting is it was amazing at coding tasks. It got expert-level rankings on code forces.
Wait, expert-level coding. So that means it's not just understanding these concepts, but it's actually using them to write working code.
Exactly.
That's huge.
And remember, this is all on top of its performance on knowledge-based tasks, where it actually outperformed its predecessor, DeepSeek V3. We're talking about an AI that can do complex math, write sophisticated code, and it has this broad general knowledge.
It sounds almost too good to be true. Are there any limitations to DeepSeek R1, or is it basically this unstoppable superintelligence?
Well, as impressive as it is, we got to remember, we're still pretty early on in AI development. DeepSeek R1 does have limitations. And in a lot of ways, those are just as interesting as its accomplishments. One thing they found is DeepSeek R1, it's actually pretty sensitive to how you prompt it. Like you give it too many hints or examples, it actually does worse.
Huh, so it's almost like it needs space to think on its own. Too much guidance and it gets thrown off. That's interesting. What other limitations did they find?
Well, it's great at stuff like math and coding, and knowledge retrieval, but there are still some things it struggles with, like um, understanding roles or functions. If you try to assign it a specific role, it's kind of like trying to explain a complex social situation to someone who doesn't really get how humans interact.
Ah, okay, so like a brilliant student who aces all the tests but doesn't quite get social cues. Makes sense. Anything else?
Yeah, one more thing I think is important. DeepSeek R1, it still has some issues with languages other than English and Chinese. Sometimes the output mixes languages, which can make it hard to, figure out what it's trying to say.
That makes sense, I guess, if most of the training data was in English and Chinese. It's like trying to speak a language you've only kind of learned. But, okay, all of this makes me even more curious about this distillation thing you mentioned earlier, like shrinking that amazing reasoning power down into smaller models. That sounds almost like science fiction.
Yeah, it's a really cool area of research. The idea is basically to take all that knowledge and those capabilities from a big, complex model like DeepSeek R1 and put them into a smaller, more efficient model.
Okay, but how does that even work? Is it
Right.
like the compressing a file on your computer or something?
It's more like, imagine you have a student, right? And they get to use these perfectly organized notes from the absolute best teacher in the world.
Okay, yeah.
Instead of having to learn everything from scratch, they get all the key insights and knowledge, but in a much more condensed form.
Ah, so these smaller AI models, they get the benefit of DeepSeek R1's knowledge without having to go through all that training themselves. That's brilliant. But did it actually work? Did these smaller models actually become like little geniuses?
Well, the results are pretty amazing. They use DeepSeek R1's knowledge to train smaller models based on Quinn and Llama architectures. And what they found was that a distilled model with only 7 billion parameters, that's a measure of how complex the model is, it actually did better than some much larger models, even GPT-4 on certain tasks.
Wow, a smaller distilled model beating out the giants. That's incredible. What does this mean for, everyday users like me?
It opens up so many possibilities. Imagine having AI with that kind of reasoning power right on your phone or even your smartwatch. Suddenly, devices we use every day could be doing things we never thought possible without, tons of computing power.
Yeah, that's a game changer. Bring cutting edge AI to like everyone. But before we get too carried away with the possibilities, let's step back a bit. What does all of this mean in the big picture? We're talking about AI that can do complex math, write code, even learn on its own. Where does that leave us humans?
Yeah, that's the big question, isn't it?
Yeah.
And there's not a simple answer. But I think the important thing to remember is that AI, at least for now, it's a tool, a really powerful tool, but still a tool. And it's up to us to decide how we use it.
So it's not about AI replacing us, but more about humans and AI working together, each doing what they're best at. That makes sense. But even if it's a tool, it's hard to deny how big of an impact this could have on all sorts of fields, right? Where do you see the biggest changes happening?
Well, one area that immediately comes to mind is scientific research. Imagine AI that can analyze massive data sets, find patterns we might miss, even come up with new hypotheses.
Yeah.
This could lead to all sorts of breakthroughs in medicine, climate science, you name it. It's not about replacing scientists. It's about giving them a super powerful new tool.
Like having a tireless research assistant that can process information in a flash and make connections we'd never even think of. What about other fields? Where else could this level of AI reasoning have a big impact?
Education is another area that could see massive change. Imagine personalized AI tutors that can adapt to how each student learns, figure out their strengths and weaknesses, give them exactly the support they need.
Wow, so everyone gets a truly personalized learning experience tailored to their needs. That sounds incredibly effective and also very fair.
Exactly. And we can't forget fields like engineering and design. AI with this kind of reasoning power could help us design more efficient systems, create innovative products, even tackle some of the world's biggest problems in totally new ways. It's like having a really smart partner helping you push the boundaries of what's possible.
It's amazing to think about all the potential benefits, but, and I think this is important to acknowledge, even with all this progress, we need to be aware of the potential downsides too, right? Oh, absolutely. Like with any powerful technology, there are risks and challenges we have to think about carefully. One of the biggest concerns is what this could mean for jobs.
Right. If AI can code, analyze data, do other tasks that people do now, what happens to those people?
It's a real concern, and we need to be proactive about addressing it. Some jobs will probably become automated, but new opportunities will emerge in areas that require uniquely human skills. We need to focus on developing things like creativity, critical thinking, and emotional intelligence, things that AI, at least for now, isn't so good at.
So it's not just about learning new technical skills, but also about developing those human qualities that will always be valuable no matter how advanced AI gets.
Exactly. And along with those economic concerns, we also need to be careful about how this technology could be misused. We have to make sure these systems are developed and used responsibly, and that there are safeguards in place to prevent unintended consequences.
It's a balancing act, right? Embracing the incredible potential of AI while also being aware of the potential risks. It is. And it takes ongoing dialogue, careful consideration, and collaboration between lots of different disciplines. We're all in this together, and it's so important that we have these conversations now, as this technology keeps advancing at such a rapid pace.
This deep dive has been quite a journey. We've looked at the technical details of DeepSeek R1, talked about its potential applications, even touched on the bigger implications for society. But before we wrap things up, I have one more question that's been on my mind. We talked about DeepSeek R1 learning to reason like humans, exhibiting those aha moments.
Yeah, those moments where it seemed to suddenly understand the problem in a deeper way.
Right. So if AI can already do all that, what's next? What other human-like capabilities could it potentially develop?
That's a really fascinating question, and I have to admit, it's a little bit unnerving to think about. We've already seen AI mastering things that we once thought were only possible for humans, but where does it go from here?
Could we see AI that can truly understand and respond to human emotions? AI that can create art that moves us or have deep conversations about philosophy and ethics?
It's a future that's both exciting and a little scary. But it's coming, and we need to be ready for it. We have to have these conversations now, explore both the potential benefits and the risks, and work towards a future where AI is used ethically and responsibly for the good of all humankind.
You've given us a lot to think about. As we wrap up this deep dive, what's the key message you'd like our listeners to take away? What's the most important thing we've learned from exploring DeepSeek R1 and the future of AI?
I think the most crucial takeaway is this. AI is changing the world around us incredibly fast, and its influence is only going to grow. It's not something to be afraid of, but we can't ignore it either. We all have a responsibility to stay informed, ask the tough questions, and engage in thoughtful discussions about how we want to shape this future.
So it's not just about understanding the technology itself, it's about understanding what it means for us and being active participants in how it's developed and used.
Yeah, it's a call to action for all of us. Not just watching it happen, but actively shaping it. But wow, this whole conversation has been a lot. DeepSeek R1, reinforcement learning, distillation, how this could affect everything from science to education to like the nature of work itself. It's a lot to wrap your head around.
It is, and it's really just a glimpse into this whole world of AI and how fast it's evolving. But I think that's what makes these deep dives so important. You know, we need to talk about it, explore the complexity, wrestle with these big questions.
Because in the end, the future of AI, it isn't set in stone. It's a future that we're actively creating. You know, with every choice we make, every conversation we have, every action we take. Yeah, exactly. And that brings me to one last thought, something to ponder as you keep thinking about all of this. We talked about DeepSeek R1, learning to reason, solve problems, have those aha moments.
Yeah.
But what if, and this is where it gets really interesting, what if AI goes beyond just mimicking human intelligence? What if it develops types of intelligence that are so different from ours, we might not even recognize them as intelligent?
Whoa. AI that operates on principles we can't even grasp? Intelligence that's basically alien to us.
Right. It's a possibility we need to be open to. As we keep pushing the boundaries of what AI can do, we got to be ready for the unexpected, for outcomes that might challenge how we even define intelligence.
It's exciting, but also a little scary, you know? What would it even mean to interact with something that intelligent, but so different? Could we communicate? Would we even understand its goals, its motivations?
Big questions, right? Questions we all need to be thinking about. And it really highlights how important it is to approach all this with a sense of humility, recognizing that we're moving into uncharted territory.
This deep dive has been a wild ride. We've gone deep into DeepSeek R1, talked about what it could do, and explored what this all means for the future. Thank you so much for guiding us through this amazing, complex landscape.
My pleasure. And remember, this is just the beginning. This conversation about AI is ongoing, and we all have a role to play.
So to everyone listening out there, keep exploring, keep asking those tough questions. What really stood out to you in this deep dive? What's still swirling around in your head?
Yeah, share your thoughts. We want to hear your perspective and keep this conversation going.
Because the future of AI, well, it's too important to leave it to chance. We need to shape this future together, thoughtfully, carefully, and with a strong sense of responsibility.
This has been The Deep Dive, a journey into the depths of knowledge and discovery.